Welcome to the Ceres podcast. I'm Stelios, founder and director of Ceres, and today I'm joined by my good friend David Miller from Miller's in Haxby for another Masterclass Interview episode. We also have a fantastic guest joining us today, Bobby Joyce from Smales. In these sessions, we dive deep into advanced frying techniques, operational insights, and key supply chain discussions to help really build your business and help grow your business. Today, as I said, we welcome back a familiar face, Bobby Joyce from Smales. Bobby was one of our first guests appearing on episode 8 and later on episode 118. If you want to hear more of his insights or a bit more about his history in the industry, go back to those episodes, especially episode 8. Bobby is a highly respected figure in the frozen at sea industry, and following our conversation with Gary Warner in episode 199, we're continuing our exploration, let's say, of the fish supply chain, especially with everything that's going on. Our goal is to bring you key voices from that industry to help you navigate the challenges ahead. And we're not just stopping the podcast. Expect plenty of written insights on this topic as well. David and I truly appreciate the experts who are willing to speak on the record, especially as the situation with frozen at sea fish is unfolding and constantly changing. Their goal, like ours, is to keep you informed. At Ceres, we've been working on something really special. Our powerful business calculators are designed to help you break down your costs and boost your profits. Understanding your inputs and outputs is absolutely crucial. Without it, you're flying blind. These calculators help you get a clear picture of your business finances, ensuring you know exactly where your money's going. We've just launched a new frozen at sea fish cost calculator because the price you pay for fish isn't the price it costs you. This tool reveals the true cost at the point of serving. Visit our website, give it a try, and take control of your numbers. And this brings us to today's sponsor, the Ceres Fish Cake Mix. With fish prices continuing to rise, maximising profit is more important than ever. We can take a lesson from butchers who turn every cut of meat into something valuable, from pies to sausages. Well, the same applies to fish. Our Ceres Fish Cake Mix allows you to turn every single ounce of fish into profit without compromising on quality. Instead of discarding trimmings, you can trim the portions of fillets to the perfect size, and the rest is used for delicious homemade fish cakes. It's fast, easy, and very profitable. You can prepare fish cakes quicker than it takes to even boil the potatoes, and we've curated countless of recipes to help you get started. So, for the perfect finish, pair them with our rustic breadcrumbs designed specifically for homemade fish cakes. They won't burn or look appetizing after cooking. Make more profit today with Ceres Fish Cake Mix, available at www.ceres.shop. If you want to stay connected with us and don't want to miss any updates, here's how. Join our WhatsApp community feed and subscribe to our mailing list. You'll get weekly emails and special offers, industry news and podcast updates, and you'll be able to find all the episode links in the description. So, on to today's podcast with Bobby Joyce and David Miller.
Good afternoon, everybody. Well, it is afternoon here today. We've got a great guest on today, Bobby Joyce from Smales. He's been on quite a few of the podcasts. Great knowledge of the industry, great knowledge of fishing. Welcome, Bobby.
Hello, guys. We okay?
Yeah, we're good.
Awesome. Thank you, Bobby. And once again, thank you for coming on. Episode 808 and nearly 200.
Bloody hell.
Yeah. So,
what was that, episode 6 or 7?
Say again.
I think my first one was that episode 6 or 7?
Episode 8. Yeah.
8.
So,
right.
You know, Bobby was one for the forward thinking. When I said to him, Bobby, I want to sit down and do a podcast. And, Bobby got it. So
there we go.
yeah, and also you've always been an open book, Bobby, which I've always liked. You've always, and if you can't answer something, you just don't, or you try, and and I think it's really important when there's times like this to discuss what's going on in the fish world.
Yeah, I think it's people have got to understand the bigger picture, really.
Yeah, and I think I don't know what you think, Dave, but I do a little bit. But in terms of what Bobby thinks, well, but like we do live in we do work in an industry where maybe it's quite insular, and people think, and I think I see this rhetoric a lot. Oh, the fishermen are having us on, and I don't know.
Well, I think for me, I think we've covered that as well. I think they always think the farmers are lifting our leg, and they always think the fishermen are lifting our leg, and it's not as simple as that. It's a natural product that takes nurturing and time to get, and unfortunately, sometimes it costs us a bit more money. And I think people have to understand that these guys, they have to make money, we have to make money, and the fishermen have to make money. So it all depends. It's like we had a good friend of yours on who said, "Sending my love." Gary Warner this morning.
Oh, right.
And he was speaking very highly of you, Bobby. Very highly.
He's a good guy, is Gary, and obviously it's he's been with his family. He's been in the trade for a long, long time. So
and his exact words were, "And Bobby's passionate about fish and chips as well."
Yes,
very much so. But he was saying today that the Icelandic fleet, or some of it, there's storms over there.
Right.
And they're going to be shored up for at least 10 days before they can go out again. That's what he was saying from the press. So he says all these things have an effect. So I think, what I'd like to get from you today, Bobby, is from your perspective, from Smales, about what's going on in the industry, a bit of background on yourself, and sort of what we've got faced with us this year, really.
Okay.
So I think a lot of people, there's a lot of comments out of that. I got a text from somebody. Now fish has gone up again, and it's going up again, and it's like, how do you know this? It's all doom and gloom, and I don't think it is always doom and gloom. If you look at the way fish comes in, it goes up and down in price, doesn't it? And sometimes we make a bit more money, and sometimes we don't. But I think as the year goes on, it averages out. And no, you can't keep putting the price up, price down, but there are ways around it.
Yeah, I mean, it's there's no doubt about it, David. We're in for a very, very difficult year, and probably a longer period, a couple of years on, particularly on cod supply. But as you say, it's and I think, in fairness to a lot of the customers we speak to, it's it's the double whammy of all the increased costs from the budget that are going to kick in soon. Particularly if people have got younger staff, the minimum wage increase and stuff. So everything's kind of hitting at once, and it's a bit sobering, really, where prices are at the minute, and we're not even busy. So it's going to be a rough ride, but I think ultimately people just have to keep a very tight control on their margins, on their portions, on every little aspect of their business. In the same way that people were probably a bit lapsadaisical with their energy consumptions until energy prices went through the roof. Then everybody found ways of making savings, or working smarter.
Yeah, a bit like having a sheet of when you turn this on, when you turn that off. It doesn't take much to start. If it hits you in the pocket, you always start thinking, how can I improve it? And unfortunately, if you'd done that years ago, you'd have a bit more money in your pocket. It's like at home, you go around turning lights after people, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's as I say, we're having some uncomfortable conversations with customers at the minute, but we're in a position as the middlemen, really, where it's not really overly relevant where the actual import price sits. We don't make much difference either way.
Yeah.
Obviously, at the minute with prices, you need to have some little margin adjustment to cover your cost of financing all this fish at these levels. But generally, it's at either end of the scale where the difference is made.
So, talking about invoicing, obviously, as you know, I'm a customer of Smales, and we get the invoice, and you get a grace of certain time to pay, don't you?
Yeah.
Well, when you're buying the fish from the fishermen, either in Norway and Iceland, do they want the money up front, or is it as you're drawing it? How do they work?
It depends which supplier you're dealing with. I mean, generally there's an acceptance of a period of credit terms, because obviously you're taking a big lot of fish in that you might not receive it until 3-4 weeks after you bought it, and then you've got to store it, you've got to distribute it. So there's a time lag. So generally, yeah, those things are done on a credit basis.
Yeah. And when they fix your price, do you know what sort of price you're going to pay before they go out, or is that decided at sea when it's coming in? How does all the pricing start? Does it start at the beginning of the year, or is it something that's going on all the time?
Generally, it's quite fluid, David. So it's generally during a trip or at the end of a trip, then the negotiations will start based on where the market's at, and some obviously if it would suit suppliers if the market was falling to fix the price before they go out, and probably not suit them to fix it if it's going up. So it's generally horses for courses, but more often than not, we'll negotiate towards the end of a landing.
Yeah, depending on what. Something interesting that Gary was saying today, and it really shocked me actually, that they might be fishing for turbot or something like that, and that they never have a problem actually getting their cod and haddock, because they treat it, especially Icelandic, treat it as a byproduct, and it's something they would fish at the end. And I found that quite amazing, really, because you always think that it's the main thing they go for. They don't have a problem, or it's easy for them to catch the cod and haddock. It's the other stuff that's difficult to catch, which I found quite interesting.
I mean, I think that's maybe more relevant to fishing in Icelandic waters.
Yeah.
But yeah, all of the fishing companies have to factor in the fact that if they're fishing for other species, they may catch haddock or they may catch cod, so they've got to allow for a bit of bycatch.
Yeah.
In their quota.
Yeah, interesting. I found that really interesting. But obviously, I know Gary deals a lot with walkers, and he said that Smales and them are intertwined. They've been together for a long time. They're the most established things, which I thought was really nice. You could tell there was like a lot of mutual respect for Smales, which I thought was really good.
Yeah, it's two well-established family businesses in the same industry, and we'll face the same challenges and the same problems as each other.
Yeah.
One thing I'd like to touch on, you mentioned it. You said that it's not even busy, and I think a lot of people, obviously, it's January, Feb now. Is supply, or even demand, shall I say, is demand down overall? Do you think? And
I think generally demand and footfall has definitely been down over the last 18 months. Yeah. I think we were on the crest of a wave as an industry during COVID. Fish and chips was the only show in town, really, for a period of time. But I think that's reflective of hospitality generally. Anyway, I think as people have gone through the cost of living crisis, they've tightened their belts, and whereas in years gone by when we've gone through those things, maybe there's been less options than there is now. So people, if they are parting with their cash, they've got more choices where to spend it.
Yeah,
but definitely the number of fish and chip meals. There was a seafood report out was down significantly last year.
Yeah, we wrote about that as well. I think it was like 27% or something down, maybe.
Yeah.
I'm always skeptical about those sort of reports, though, because the data pool is quite, I don't know, data reporting from the industry is quite weak at the best of times. So I'd love to know where they get the data from, to be honest.
Well, I mean, a lot of that could come from pubs as well. Fish and chips. A lot of pubs serve fish and chips, so I'm not 100% sure myself. Still, I've not really delved into the detail, but I think generally, we've seen a pattern of sales of items like sausages or coated chicken have increased in the last year, 18 months, and fish sales are probably down. My analogy was if a shop was, most shops, if they was using 10 cases a week, probably using 8.
Yeah.
So there's that little 15-20% reduction. And I think everybody's lunchtime trade's probably taking a hit as well, because working from home, supermarket meal, there's lots of different reasons why the lunchtime's probably eased off a bit.
I am optimistic that lunchtimes will creep up again, though, especially with seeing reports that people are getting back to the office. I don't know whether that comes straight back to the chip shop, because I think it is a very competitive marketplace, the lunch times, and
it is. But I think you're seeing shops starting to think a bit more creatively about what they can offer and bundle things together in a similar format that people get from other places, obviously from supermarkets, where you go and get a complete lunch for £5-6, whatever it is.
Absolutely. No, I think it's a no-brainer. We wrote about something like that a few weeks, and I think Mark Petru wrote something about lunchtimes as well, and on our website. So for anybody listening, they could just jump over and have a look. But I think, he was saying, like, if you've got 3 or 4 products, a lunchtime menu that's specifically aimed at lunchtimes, you don't carry it over to evening. You make sure that it's fast, so people aren't in the queue for 30 minutes, 40 minutes. Because again, you know what it's like. You got a lunchtime break. You don't want to be waiting half an hour for food. You want to grab it and go. So I do think maybe fish and chips has that advantage that we can build a menu around that.
Yeah.
And it doesn't need to be a huge piece of product. It doesn't need to be an 8-ounce fish. It can just be a nice 4-ounce and a few chips and a side, if that's what the meal is.
But I think people are looking for that sort of meal at lunchtime. They don't want heavy meals anymore, do they? They just want something light, and your mini fish or whatever, mini fish and chips and peas or whatever would fit the bill on that. I think really.
You're getting back to that conversation that 30, 40 years ago, whatever it was, a portion of fish and chips was probably 3 ounces of fish and a scoop of chips, whereas the portion's gone up and up and up. People don't want 8 ounces of fish and 10 ounces of chips for the lunch and then go back to work. It knocks you out.
Yeah. I sometimes
imagine
don't want it at tea time.
It's a very French diet, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, some people don't want it at night, do they? I mean, most people, if you say to them, please don't, you'll go in and say, don't give me many chips, please. I get too many. I never eat them,
Yeah.
So I think you're right there. You're very true.
Yeah, but I guess, and then in isolation, that's great. But I think most people listening to this, I know shops all around. I'm in the Midlands, so shops around here doing like a 9-ounce plus for a regular. They won't call that a large. They'd probably do a mini and a regular, or a mini and a large, whatever. Like, I know shops that do 11-ounce, and you think, so that is a hefty portion. And I guess if they gave less, customers would be like, "Oh, what are you doing?" Like,
if you price it accordingly,
absolutely, yeah.
If you're trying to give less for the same money, then people.
I'm sure many don't price it accordingly. I'm just trying to think out the box here, like and I think, you're right. It's fine if they do, but some don't, and and I think this is what then gets us to like the problems we've got today. Like, but you could argue that your customers since probably November 2013 were quite happy and quiet and not giving you a headache because the prices were quite low. And then
they were still giving us a headache about buying cheaper, don't they?
So you didn't actually get a break from it at all then?
You just have a different conversation, still.
Yeah. See, it's really different because, in the batter game, we don't really get that. It doesn't move the dial. Like, you've got to increase the price of batter a considerable amount for anybody to even notice the difference. Yeah. Fish is a protein, and like fish and potatoes really get people going in this industry, and rightly so, I guess, because they are the two major components. You can't do much without batter, but you can't do anything without fish. So it's interesting. What sort of let's start with, what do you deem as the problems? Let's start there before we start looking at what we think are the solutions.
Problems in terms of supply. I mean, the main cause of the problem is the fact that the quota this year is the lowest it's been in 34 years. If we look back 10 years, 10 years ago, we were at probably 900,000 tons was the quota for the Barents Sea.
Yeah.
And this year, I think it was 340,000 tons.
Wow.
So it's almost a third of what it was, and that's whole fish. So you've got to half that for the amount of actual fillets you're going to get yielded from that. So that's the main issue. Is demand is high from countries like China and the US and in Europe, but while the demand may have tailed off or peaked out, it's still at a high level whereby the quota that can catch can't match it.
I guess in some ways you sort of hope that Trump slaps a load of tariffs on foreign fish. So that'll help us out over here, wouldn't it? Because
it
Well,
depends.
shall I check the news because he might have done that already?
Well, they're saying it's 10% on Chinese imports, which I don't think is going to make a huge difference.
I think that's on top of another tariff that's already there, though. To be fair, So
we'll see on that, and obviously high H&G prices don't really filter through to the end user for a few months. So that may turn people off, and in other markets, and if it does, it might push vessels to do more fillets with the quota that they've got. But there's no getting away from the fact that there's a significantly less abundant quota for them to catch than there has been in previous years.
So I take it what we're probably going to see is a bit of a squeeze on, and I'm just guessing here, on graded fillets. So like 5 to 8, 10 to 12, like the tightly graded. Is that where the squeeze comes first when this happens, or not really?
It hasn't at the minute. The squeeze has been more on the traditional sizes, or the jump in price has been more on the traditional sizes, because the tightly graded got quite high, particularly on cod, and kind of stayed at reasonably high. And the gap between the normal grades pin bone in and the tight grade skinless boneless was probably a bit out of sync, really.
So what are you finding people switching from? Obviously, cod's more expensive than haddock, and we've been talking to a few people and operators, and they've actually switched from cod to haddock. Have you found people doing that, Bobby?
But to a certain extent, I think there's some people who've maybe now cod's at the level it's at, are considering it more seriously, but then that's pushing demand upon haddock, and haddock's rising. Haddock was, from September 23 onwards, we had a market crash on haddock. And there's a lot significant.
Is that before it went missing, Bobby? Because it did go missing for a bit, didn't it? Do you remember? It was like, where is it? They couldn't find it.
It was after then, but there was a bit of an oversupply in the market. I think America had stopped buying as much as there had been, which forced prices down. But the gap between cod and haddock in some instances was £100 a case at that point, and people wouldn't switch. But I think now that the price they're having to pay for cod has jumped up so much from that point, they will look at haddock as an alternative. But you've still got an element of shops who, they're telling us that their customers know what they want before they go in, and if haddock's on offer for a pound a portion cheaper, they'll still go for the cod in certain areas.
Yeah, and obviously the demand, the amount of haddock coming in will not match the amount of cod that's coming in. So that's not sustainable, is it? If people start switching,
it's not. I mean, I think that the Barents Sea haddock's going to be very low in supply due to production for H&G for processors because of the prices that they're achieving there. We are getting good regular supply from Iceland at the minute, but we're competing with other markets to get that, so that's forcing haddock prices up. And then if we increase demand in the UK on haddock, then it will have an effect on price. And there's been a bit of a readjustment in the last few months on haddock prices, which were probably, as I said, too far away from cod anyway.
Yeah.
But for it to be sustained at those levels, but yes, we're seeing a few shops try it, David, but I don't think that I don't see a lot making that switch permanently.
How if a cod shop, let's call it a cod shop, if they jump over to haddock, and they find it hard, how do they manage jumping over to something like pollock and trying to get that on the menu? Because then that's another step away, isn't it? Surely that's a bit of a reach, then, isn't it? Well,
I don't think it's not realistic anyway, Stelios. To be fair, I mean the pollock we get in fillet format in this country tends to be double frozen. It's processed in China. It's a bit thinner. It doesn't stand up to frying as well as cod or haddock. There's for serving fish that deep fried in batter the way we do. There's probably only a few species that really do the job consistently well and look and feel and taste right.
This isn't a value judgment, but a friend of mine tried a case of pollock, and he said basically and I'm being polite, it was as dry as Gandhi's flip-flops. And like, I'm not, if anybody wants to use it, that's fine, give it a try. But he was saying, like, I tried it. He goes, I ended up putting it all in fish cakes. He goes, because I didn't want to serve my customers that.
It can be quite watery as well.
Yeah,
that was the double frozen stuff.
That was the weird thing, because he said it not only was it watery, but it was dry to eat as on the palate. And I wonder if it just releases its water very quickly after being, like you say, double frozen, Bobby. I don't know, but obviously fresh pollock or fresh species, that might be different because it's handled very differently, and so we don't want to make that distinction. But I think if you're trying to give someone an alternative, you've probably got to make sure it's close to the stuff they're really used to, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And as I said, there's some shops doing it with haddock and doing a good job of it. I know we've spoken in the past about Coley still and safe, but people, that's very much in demand in Europe. I
was going to say that's one thing that has changed. Like if we look back to like episode 8 when we first spoke, there wasn't a huge demand for Coley in Europe. It was there, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't what it is now. And I remember like asking you not long ago for another customer of mine for a price on Coley, and I think it wasn't far off cod anyway. It wasn't.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bit of a gap now, but there's not really any volume being offered to the UK because there's enough of a home for it in other markets. We've seen decent supplies of the hake coming through, which is another good alternative. But other than that, there's not really many whitefish species that people can jump onto to do fish and chips with.
Yeah, it just takes some beating, doesn't it? I said that. I say it all the time. Good haddock, good cod.
Yeah,
when it's fried, takes some beating, and to me, it's very hard to find the substitute for that. And when it comes to fish and chips, it's one or the other. I think the demographics are 60% of the UK is cod, and the other 40 is haddock, and it's simple as that. You don't get another percentage of using hake or anything. They might have it on as a special, but to actually become your full-time fish, that's a big jump for me.
Yeah. And for, I think there's room to offer other species, and really, I think we should be trying to encourage that anyway, even in a normal market. But in a market like this, really, what you've got to do is just make sure you're sourcing well, you're getting the right products, you're making it as good quality as you can be, get the portion under control, and sell it on its quality.
Yeah, I think
at the right price.
I think one of the things I've always said on these podcasts is that I've always thought that the UK has this, like the UK population or consumer has this over reliance on the big five, and that's cod, haddock, prawn, salmon, and tin tuna, and I think there's a reason for that. And like I've never really thought about it until what David just said, and that's because they're good. They do take some beating. Like and we're British and we want the best. We don't want when I was in Norway and we were walking around and they were showing us around this salting factory, and like they showed you like the salted cod that usually comes to either a little bit to the UK, but mostly the rich Spanish countries. The rich European countries like Spain or Portugal, and then they were showing us like the salted coley that still had bone in it and had blemishes in it, and that, without being rude, it was going to Africa because it was a lower price point. And I thought to myself, the British population do demand the best, and I think that's because they know it's good and they want a nice piece of haddock or cod that hasn't got blemishes in it or worms in it or bone in it. And I think so, but that also carries a premium too.
It does, but the other thing as well is that there's plenty of other species we can eat, but European countries tend to they'll bake or grill, or they'll do different things with them fish that wouldn't really suit species. Them species wouldn't suit being dunked in batter and deep fried.
Yeah,
I mean, it makes me laugh, really. I mean, obviously, I do have fish and chips, but not all the time because I'm in
twice a week. Yeah, just twice a week.
But you go away on holiday. I go away on holiday. All I eat is fish. I might have a bit of meat once, and the rest is fish. And it just amazes me. But I never ever sort of do that when I'm in UK. It's either meat or meat, and then once a year maybe fish, and then fish and chips. I think it's just the way it works in the UK, and I think your fish and chips, as I always say, and people get bored of it. It's in our DNA, isn't it? It's just if you're thinking of fish, if you're going to eat fish, how would you have it? They'd go fish and chips.
Yes,
and,
it's what we grew up with.
Bigger important.
Well, I guess it's also
people love it.
I guess it's also really comforting the way we have it, wrapped in batter, deep fried with chips, with mostly cold weather, mostly for the most part, except for a few days in the summer. Whereas when you go to like Spain or wherever, Greece, Italy, it is like different styles of fish, maybe pan fried or even deep fried, but like frito misto, and you can have it with a glass of wine. But that's also because the weather's nice and you're on holiday, and so I think we only see that in a good light as well, don't we? So
absolutely.
But I do think, like I've been in the trade long enough, like you both have, not as long as David, obviously, because it would have been pushing him around in a wheelchair at this rate. But but there's always been. I've tried it as well. When I was in the shops full time, I tried offering different species, and to some degree, customers just didn't want them. They'd smile and they'd say, "Oh, it's £1 cheaper. Oh, and it's 2 ounces bigger. Yeah, okay." They come in next week. What would you like? Cod and haddock, like that. It was, and I was in a shop where it was pretty much half and half cod and haddock because we were in like Warwickshire and Leicestershire border, so they like both, and which was good to some degree because you could just give people whatever they wanted, and anything like they just didn't want. Like I did hokey, they didn't want it. I did hake, they didn't want it. Tried pollock, that was for the bin. Like, and I'm not being anti-pollock. It's just they just didn't want it. I think customers want their cod and haddock, and they'll moan about the price for the most part. Don't get me wrong; they'll say, "Oh bloody hell, that's gone up." But when you then say to them, "Oh, would you like a fillet of hokey instead?" like, or whatever else it is, they'll be like, "No, it's all right. I'll just have the cod, thanks." So they do. It strikes me as the people that moan about Heinz beans as being expensive and then won't buy the cheaper Tesco beans. They just want the Heinz beans. But while they're there, they will moan about the price of Heinz beans. So, and I do think that gives us a bit of resilience in the industry. I do think, given that if customers know that, you know what, I'm paying top dollar, you've had to put the price up on fish. We're not happy about that. We are going to whinge about that, but we still want it to be good. I think that's a bit of built-in resilience into the product, if that makes sense.
I think it is, and I think for me, it's important that if I ran a shop, I would be trying to offer some kind of better value meal or portion, whatever it might be. But ultimately, if you want really, really good fish and chips, a good size, then you should be expected to pay the right price for that.
Yeah, and I think one thing Gary said earlier, which made a lot of sense, and I thought about it in a different way, like because the other day I was looking at the price of cigarettes. Because that was always something that was always in line with fish and chips over the years, but now that's rocketed because of the taxes and everything. But like they're like £18 a packet now. Gary was saying a pint's like £9 or whatever. What did he say? I can't remember, David, but you'd know about
pints.
Well, how much is a pint?
He must drink in posh places.
No, how much did he say a pint was? I wouldn't even know because I don't drink it.
You go to Sam Smith's and get it for something ridiculous.
Okay,
I've no idea.
Okay, so
Guinness is about 6.
Okay, so let's say £7-8, whatever. Yeah, like, and yet fish and chips has gone up in proportion to everything else. I don't think it's gone up more than anything else. I think that I think look around you, go to the supermarket, go to the petrol station. I don't, when I see this all doom and gloom in our industry about, fish has gone, fish and chips is now not affordable to the common man. Well, a lot of people have had pay rises, so it's not that bad either. Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
I think, funnily enough, I was with a customer last week whose family's been in the business a long, long time. And he found some old paperwork from the shop from the early 1970s. And he was paying the staff 12 pence an hour or 13 pence an hour back then, and fish and chips was the same price as an hour's wage back then. So if you took that to the minimum wage now,
we're under it a bit, give or take.
We're under it.
Yeah, and that was for a lot smaller portion as well.
Yeah. So it's relative, isn't it?
I mean, obviously that's pre-VAT as well. But
do you think we should spend more time on explaining to customers how good the fish is and what top quality it is, and this is why we should demand this price?
I think as an industry, we've and I understand it. We've certainly since prices spiked after the Ukraine invasion. I think all the messaging was advertising how expensive it was, or how expensive it was going to be. I just think we missed a trick. I think gram for gram, pound for pound, we've got an unprocessed, high quality product. We should be singing its virtues and actually telling people it's worth what we're charging. It's probably worth more.
Yeah, in fact,
but let's sing the virtues of it.
In fact, you've got a cheap deal. You go to any restaurant and they'll have a little square of talking about smoking, like a swan box, piece of meat. Yeah, admittedly, it's thick from a 1632 maybe, and it'll have some name with it, and you'll be paying 30 quid for it, 32 quid.
Yeah, and look, I think fish and chips is humble food. So but it's certainly, when I say, if you look at the volume being given away and then break that down per 100 grams to anything you're competing with, we've got a fantastic value of product, and as I say, it's clean eating. It's not full of additives or processed nasties.
Absolutely.
I think that's a really important point. Look at, for example, car dealerships. Look at all this lot. Like, when the price of a car go up, you don't see them advertising their offers are gone or prices are expensive on a Honda Jazz. They just carry on selling at the price. And when customers go in, they'll explain, oh, well, it's not 11 grand anymore. It's now, you can't buy anything for 11 grand from a car dealership now. But, you're not going to say that no more. They just say, oh, this is a great deal. They always focus on the great deal. And I mentioned him in the other podcast earlier, but like Mark Drummond, he says, I'll never advertise price increases. He goes, but what I will do when I do have price increases is have a little, little sheet for the staff to really understand why. So if a customer challenges them, they'll then explain why. So, and again, I think this whole advertising increases, it just basically shouts out to customers, you were going to come in and don't bother now. So I really fear that sort of that explaining before you need to explain. If a customer comes in and buys something, then they think, oh, 1 minute, that's 20p dearer than it was last week. Then explain, oh, well, fish went up, oh, potatoes went up, whatever it is, oil went up, like staff wages, blame it on the government. That everyone else seems to be doing that at the minute. That helps. So but yeah, I just think advertising a negative is a waste of advertising for a start, because I think it has a double negative effect.
Absolutely.
So, but I do think that we just need to be careful that, because after the Ukraine crisis, there was a lot of media about fish and chips being expensive. And I think that I know anecdotally a lot of shops that said to me they'd not put up prices, and customers were coming in and kicking off saying, I bet you've put up prices. I bet you've put up prices, because I ain't put up prices. And one shop in Nottingham that I supply, he'd not put up his prices, and the same customer that had come in the week before had said he'd seen it on the news, and he said, I know you've put up prices, and he goes, I haven't put up prices yet. So I think that with one foul swoop you can really alienate customers, because and another story, Fred Capel we all know Fred, and he was just after that crisis, he was walking his dog and near his house. And his neighbour close by says to him something like, oh, what is it you do? And they were chatting. He goes, oh, I own Chez Fred's, because he doesn't live near the shop. And they're like, oh, really? He goes, oh, I bet you're expensive now, because they'd seen it on the news. And he was like, no, he goes, come in. If you're ever in the area, pop in. I'll treat you to a meal so you can see. And they're his neighbours, so he can be nice. And once he sort of explained to them, well, actually, no, I haven't put my prices anyway. And they were chatty, they're outside of that environment. It helps, Yeah. But the common misconception when it's all over the news, when you've got a lot of industry people doing newspaper articles with a sad face, and at the same time, you've got consumers that are really struggling to pay their gas bills and their electric bills. I think it's a whole avalanche of negative news that we don't need to be involved in.
Yeah, you're almost making people's minds up before they've even left the house that they're not going to be able to afford fish and chips.
Well, and the worst thing is they'll then go on Deliveroo and order 4 burgers, £20 a pop. So it's we lost anyway.
Sorry, Bobby, go on.
Well, I don't know how you feel as an operator, David. I think that to me is the future in the industry. Is we've got to be on a par with all these other options that are out there. So the shop's got to look right, the packaging's got to look right, the product's got to look right, and then people will spend their money.
I think what we do at Miller's. We do obviously traditional. We do your street food. We're always looking how can we modernise things and get those people under 30 coming in, because they're our future customers. They're the ones that seem to have a bit more money, but they will order a bag of chips with Deliveroo, and you just look at the price and go, really?
Yeah.
They're not bothered about what we're charging. So you could actually say we could charge 15 quid for our fish and chips.
Yeah.
Or you do something like a Christmas market, you've got a lot of rent to pay, but you put it up and you think nobody's going to pay for that. And you wish you put it up another quid by the time you finish, because they don't bat an eyelid. So it's a real funny one for me, because people will pay a lot, but then there's a misconception. Because they come through the front door of a fish and chip shop, they expect it to be a certain price. And I think you're really right that you've got to think to the future. And I think it's really important to come up with some different stuff to get people in. And it is the future. Deliveroo, Just Eat, Uber Eats, any delivery format isn't going to go away. But I think the delivery format is like, let's say you have an app or whatever, they pick that up and they just press the button. They don't actually look at the price. Yeah. There's no money goes across the counter. There's no swiping a card. It's just literally you press your button and it's paid for and the order goes. And it makes me laugh, because if they actually came in the shop, they'd actually question the price. But when they're doing it on an app or anything like that, they don't seem to notice it.
Yeah, it's supposed
you
to
find that? It's crazy.
It's a bit like, people will spend differently on card than they will if they've got cash in their pocket. It's there's some missing part of that transaction that then bypasses price. I mean, we are a bit unique. I think, out of a lot of the things you can have delivered, fish and chips is the one thing that really deteriorates in quality from the minute the fryer hands it, the server hands it over. It's, it's not doesn't travel as well as certain other things.
I think one journey's okay. Like, I think if it's in a boot and it's going from David's to yours, I mean, that's fine. But if it's going to go 4 different places, a pizza can withstand that better than fish and chips. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Or a curry or whatever.
Curry's wet, isn't it? It's even better for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But I think, I think it's important that if your shop looks right, your boxes look right, your bags, all these things. So I think if you just wrap it in some greaseproof paper and it looks greasy and it's just dumped in front, it makes it feel like it should be cheaper than it is.
Yeah. So what you're saying, if you dress it better, your shop's better.
I think all the branding has to go with it, because
everything like that, you've got a better chance of going, right, you're in my shop, you can trust us, but this is what it's, not in that way. This is what the price is going to be, but you can charge that. Yeah. They trust you, and they will give you that money because of that full package. Not
you feel the actual product. Feel safe spending that money there.
Yeah,
it's weird because a friend of mine knows a burger place in the east of England, and basically they only open on a Friday and a Saturday, and they're pretty much cook from home. Pretty much, they've turned their home into a commercial kitchen, and they've got all the accreditation that they need and everything. But literally, they'll do 20, 30 burgers on the weekend, 20, 30 orders on each day, Saturday. But you wouldn't know it to look at it. It's got its own grease proof. It looks well designed, well branded. It looks like something Nick would knock up at the street food, to be honest. And I think people are also, even if it's takeaway, they want a bit of an experience. And I think Bobby's right to some degree. If it just comes twisted like a tea towel, in old wrap packaging, paper, and like you say, you've got grease spots all over it, it's probably not going to help your cause. And also, you still see a lot of shops out there with probably 40-year-old frying ranges, Formica tiles, and if customers see that and think, well, actually, that's not really invested in, I'm going to go somewhere that looks a bit nicer, that could happen too. There's a lot of that going on. People will vote with their feet.
I think it's happening anyway, still. Wouldn't you agree, Bobby, that the customers
I would agree. I mean,
are moving away from that sort of setup, I think.
Yeah, and there's certain shops that'll have a reputation and they'll trade on that, in certain areas. But yeah, I just think if you're walking down a high street or you're going anywhere, fish and chips is becoming a bit of a destination thing at the minute, more than a casual, quick purchase. Then, personally, I was in London last week. I went to see the new Mayfair chippy, and absolutely great. And he's paying a lot for these boxes, but they've got just look absolutely first class. And he's paid a bit extra for them, but you think in that area, if it turns up packaged as well as that, you're going to be thinking, I'm paying for a great product here before you've even opened the box.
Yeah.
And look,
true.
We eat with our eyes, don't we? Like whatever you say. And I think one thing I always said, and I've said it across a lot of episodes, is that I've said it to anybody that would listen, pretty much, like whether it's a private conversation or a public conversation like this, but like, if fish and chips starts to go up in price, you better make sure that it's the best it can bloody be. Because once it starts to go up in price, like you just said, it's more of a destination thing rather than a stopgap. Like, people are spending their hard-earned money. It's hard out there. Electric bills are going up. Everything's going up. People are starting to make choices. And, you read about people that will work from home Monday to Friday and put the heating off because they'll wear extra clothes so they can have a nice weekend. So do we want to be part of that extra spend on the weekend? And I think the answer is yes. So I think we need to make sure that when they eat it, it tastes bloody good. And I think a lot of the investment on our side, looking from a supplier, has been making sure that, we have delivered flavor or flavor solutions, because you want people to eat fish and chips and think, wow, that tastes nice.
Well,
I think that's the one thing that, not across the board, but in general terms, you'll see it, David, with the training that you've done, and you'll see it still with the customers you deal with. I think the level of skill and professionalism coming into the industry is definitely been just steadily improving year on year.
Without a doubt, yeah. And the knowledge they want is phenomenal, and they want to do it right. And invariably, you just look at the awards, which I know you a supporter of, Bobby. A lot of those people in the awards have had training or gone through, to visit other good shops or things like that. And you can see that they've taken everything on board, and they really do, as you say, there's some fantastic operators that are young coming through, and you think where they're going to be in the next 15 years. Just amazing, I think.
And I've been judging the awards, and some of the younger people that are now going in the industry, they're just phenomenal businesses. They look great. The level of detail and thought that they put into what they do, not just the fish and chips, but the whole package, is really encouraging. And we may see, as it gets harder to operate in terms of cost pricing and stuff, you might see a reduction in shops. But I think the quality and the standards is going to go up.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant.
I think one thing that and also I think with the aggregators, and whether it's doing it online yourself or whatever it is, I think that removal of friction really helps. The quicker you can take people's money, the better. Like, don't give them a reason not to spend. I've always thought this, when we built our website, we wanted to have every payment possible. We didn't want to have any headache thinking, oh, well, I want to do it like this or I want to do it like that. No, you can do it by the time you can message me and ask a question, payments taken. And I think removing friction wherever possible. And I think that's where aggregators really win, because you've probably already got, I don't have any apps, but someone who's going to order off delivery or Just Eat, they've probably already got that app, number one. They don't have to download it specially. They then look at the product, and like David said, just order what they fancy, hopefully without looking at a price. But I have noticed, there are some real local businesses that are really capitalizing on these platforms, and whether it's halal burgers or ribs or just normal burgers, that they're really capitalizing. And I think why? It's because it's trendy. And also I think one thing that fish and chips has got going for it, sorry, I nearly said against it, but for it, is that it is a guilty pleasure. It's something that I don't think we should be trying to say how, don't get me wrong, we shouldn't be saying it's bad, because it's definitely not bad, but we shouldn't be going down this avenue of saying how healthy it is. I think people want a guilty pleasure. They want to eat something and say, you know what, that was great. I needed that. That hit the spot. And, think of Haagen-Dazs. You don't see them saying how healthy it is, do they? It's just so, you eat it and you shouldn't have. Yeah, you eat it, whatever ice cream it is that you like, fill the gap. I said Haagen-Dazs, it could be Ben & Jerry's, it doesn't matter. Yeah. But they're not trying to say how healthy they are. They're just saying, you fancied it and you enjoyed it. And that's it. And that's where we need to be. We need people to say, it's a bit like when you say, I'm going to order a Chinese. Why is it that, because they haven't gone out there and said, oh, we're healthy, we're all of that. They've just carried on doing what they do. Like,
Yeah.
you know, and I think fish and chips needs to get back to that. This is bloody good grub. Like, you know, it's good food. And I think we're not trying to be Michelin starred. We're not trying to be posh. We're just trying to be great. And I think that's
it.
Yeah.
Well, it's virtues. You know, you can say it's a bit better in terms of being unprocessed, but it's just brilliant.
Yeah.
You know,
It is.
let's get that message across. It's, you know, we're here and we're doing it. You know, the industry's doing a very good job of selling the products as a whole very well.
One of the things,
Right, I'm changing the subject now.
I was just going to do that too.
But I'm conscious. I've not really spoken much about fish supply.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm going to talk about, Bobby.
You'll have to edit all this out.
He just goes off on a tangent. And it's just like
tangent to what we're made for.
He needs lunging every now and again, you know, like a horse to bring him back in. Bobby, just say to me, you know, you've been in the industry all your life almost, haven't you? Worked at Smales and worked your way up now, and you're the UK sales director. Is that right?
Sales and marketing director.
Yeah, sorry. And what's the biggest change you've seen getting the supply of fish in? Monitoring what's coming in, what would you say is the biggest change you've seen?
The biggest change really is the consolidation of the supply chain, supply base.
And
you know,
can you explain what that means? Or
yeah, I mean, funny, we covered it. I think we covered it in the first episode I ever did with Sal. But generally, I mean, in the 80s and 90s, there was probably 50, 60 companies just in Norway that we could, you know, buy fish off, or, you know, certainly a lot in Norway. There was maybe 50, 60 in Europe that we were speaking to, and that'll be less than 20 now.
Yeah.
They're probably around 10 or 12 these days.
Yeah. And are they harder to deal with then?
Not that they're harder to deal with. Obviously, look, the investment in the technology in terms of the trawlers and you know, the longliners and the kit, again, they've really upped the professionalism and the investments that they make, and the bigger companies have bought out smaller ones as time's gone on. So that, you know, that gives them a certain amount of leverage and financial strength.
Yeah. So Smales, do you mainly deal with the Norwegians, Icelandic?
So we're dealing with Norway, Iceland, Faroe Islands, and then, you know, as you might know, the Norwegians and Russians own all the quota in the Barents Sea.
Yeah.
But then they will trade some of that quota with other EU nations for access to their waters for species that they like to catch.
Got you. Yeah.
So they'll trade a bit of Barents Sea quota with the UK for the Kerkella trawler in return for accessing our waters might be for Coley, Saith, or Ling. You know, they or some shrimp maybe. So there's some swapping of species quota to suit each country.
And are you involved in that then? Are you no, not involved? Are you privy to that happening? And do they?
No, that's done. You know, that's done politically and between the fishing nations and the quota holders themselves. Really.
Yeah.
We just we're sat in the middle, building on, you know, long-term relationships with these companies to try and retain fish coming to the UK and being at the front of the queue to buy it.
You know, I always say that the fisherman, if you meet a fisherman, you know, I always say, you know, look how he's dressed. Don't, for Christ's sake, don't look at his watch. They're great businessmen, aren't they? They really are, you know.
Yeah, they are.
From what I've met, they're very shrewd, very good at what they do. Tough to crack almost. But, you know, I think they're very fair. But I do think that they're tremendous businessmen. I think it's probably the hard life they've had at sea. The guys that, you know, back on shore now when the sons are probably out as skippers.
Yeah,
they're very wily people, aren't they?
Yes, they are. But I mean, that, you know, in some ways, I see it as you know, a lot of these guys don't just end up in senior roles. You know, they work their way through the family business or whatever, and spend time at sea and get to, you know, they're very, very personal with the crew that they've got, and ultimately they know that how well they do reflects directly in what the crew earn.
Yeah.
So, you know, and what a tough job the crew's got. Even, you know, with all the advances in technology, it's still a hard graft going out and catching fish for a living.
Yeah, and still dangerous, even though these boats are still amazing. It's a hell of a hazardous life, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, and it's hard work, and as I say, where they place that fish and for what price directly feeds back into the crew's wages. So that they've got to do the right thing by them and get the best return that they can.
So when you're buying the fish, Bobby, do you do a lot of it face to face, emails, telephone calls? How does it work with you guys and the people you buy from?
It's a mixture, David, but ultimately we are built on some of these guys, we've been trading with them since the late 1970s.
Yeah,
and his generations, of their family and the Smales family or Smales employees have worked together and collaborated on importing fish to the UK.
Yeah.
So it's a mixture of emails, phone calls, visits, a mixture of everything, and it depends on the market circumstances as well.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a buyer's market, sometimes it's a seller's market. It's a traded product, and that's how it works.
It's up and down, isn't it? It's up and down. Yeah. And one question I did want to ask you is, I know that you guys visit the Kirkella sometimes. You've taken people there. You've asked me to go. Unfortunately, I'm not being able to make it. How's that boat doing? Because it's such a shame we only have one, isn't it? I mean, what did we used to have going out from Hull? Deep sea trawlers.
Yeah, there was dozens and dozens of them going out of Hull at one point. I think Hull lost 6,500 men at sea.
Wow.
Yeah.
It was Lost Trawlerman's Memorial Weekend last week, I think, here. So yeah, but the Kirkella's the only one going out to. That goes up to Fair Island and Svalbard, right up north.
Oh, right up. So what will be that? That'll be 10 days sailing, I would think, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it's a long old chug up there. Yes.
And how long will they spend fishing then there?
Depends how fishing's going, and sometimes it's too icy for them, so they have to wait, to get through. But usually it's about 4, 5, 6 weeks, probably more towards 6 weeks.
That's a long time, because like the Norwegians, Icelandic, they're about 28 days out there back to port usually.
Yeah, I mean the Icelanders definitely, if they're fishing in their own waters, which there will be now, because none of the Icelanders can go to the Barents Sea at the minute because there's not the quota there for them to be able to do it. But in their own waters, yeah, they do 4-week trips.
Yeah, and where are their own waters? What is it? Just around Iceland, or
just around Iceland? Yeah.
Greenland Sea at all, or not as far as that?
No. There's some quota in Greenland for the Greenlandic vessels, and then again, some of the Norwegians or whatever you will get some quota up there and go and fish. Go and fish now and again. So the Greenlandic quota has been pretty consistent, as has the Icelandic quota, and that's helped offset the issues that we're having with the Barents Sea at the minute.
Yeah. And how long do you think the Barents Sea issue is going to carry on for? Is it because of the war, or is it because, obviously the scientists have said you can only fish this amount of quota, like 20% reduction, or how long can you foresee that?
Well, I think the quota levels we're at now, which are low, there is a chance of another reduction next year.
Ooh. Good news there, Bobby.
So what was it reduced this year, Bobby? 20%?
So it was 25% this year.
Yeah.
It was recommended to be 31.
Yeah. And why didn't they take that 31? Is there a reason for that?
I think that's a scientific recommendation, and then there is some negotiation. There always is negotiations on what is the right level. I think if it went any lower than where it is this year, then it does have some effect on the quota agreements that Norway has with other EU countries, in terms of they have to be redrawn or reassessed. So there might be that reason why they've held it where they did. And but yeah, I think
you say next year it might go down again.
Yeah, I mean the main reasons behind it is it's a mixture of reasons. They've looked at the fishing, how much fish, how successful the companies have been at fishing in the last 2 or 3 years, and fishing's not been great. So that suggests that there isn't maybe as many fish it's ready to be caught. also they try and catch fish that is 4 or 5 years old if we're talking about cod, and generally cod doesn't start spawning until it's about 6 or 7 years old.
Right.
So I think they're finding that the year classes are a bit smaller. They're also saying that the sea temperatures may be affecting where the plankton's going, which the cod larvae need that to feed on.
Yeah, the feeding ground.
So
is that pushed further north then?
There's a school of thought. I think there's some research going on at the moment on that, but that fish is going further north to spawn, which is maybe taking a bit of energy out the fish as well. That are going up that way.
Yeah,
but that the feeding grounds probably aren't as abundant as they have been for the larvae and the young cod. So there's less probably surviving until to that age group where we need them. So I think on cod and on cod specifically, they reckon there's probably another 2 or 3 years of quotas around the levels that they're at now, maybe a little bit lower, before we start to see increases. I think haddock's slightly different. I think haddock is looking pretty stable and could well go up in the next year or two a little bit.
So is it just that cod has just been overfished then in those seas? Because someone said to us the other week that just simply talking, they've just been overfished.
Not overly. I mean, I think that there's always the scientists will always recommend a bigger reduction in quota,
and then the politics kicks in, I guess.
Yeah, but it's like I say, it's a mixture of things. That they've noticed that the zooplankton in southern parts of the Barents Sea has gone down, so they're thinking that the cod's pushing further north. So they need to do some research in that part of the sea. Yes, there's certainly they've maybe been fishing and because cod's been a bit smaller, they're taking that out the water a little bit. But I don't think it's overfishing. They're quite strong on making sure the quota levels are hit.
Okay. When I was in Norway last year, I met a scientist there, that does all of this, and he says one of the biggest things, one of the biggest species collapse isn't actually, it comes before a cod collapse, but it's capelin. If there's no capelin, then the species can't live, they can't grow, they can't thrive. So I wonder if that's under duress as well. I don't know. I'm just guessing. I wonder if that.
I know there has been a ban on capelin fishing.
Yeah,
and that's definitely part of it. In that what the smaller cod is feeding on has not been as plentiful or as easy for them to get to. So we've definitely seen a reduction in the amount of spawning age cod in those waters. So it's maybe not that there's less fish, but less fish of the right size and the right
absolutely.
So that's that's a huge factor.
What do you see as the most immediate headwinds that need to be corrected before we start getting back onto the right trajectory?
Well, I think they've just got to keep working on the scientific side of things in finding out where the cod's going, where the zooplankton's going, where the capelin's going, and work that out. See slightly bigger classes of fish and fish of spawning age coming through, and then I think they'll be able to start looking at increasing the quota.
Okay,
it's a big job, isn't it? It's a big job.
Huge,
it's not something that you can just go out and sort out in a month, is it? If you've got research,
it takes years.
It's a big job, isn't it? A really big job.
And a lot of these vessels, particularly the Norwegian guys that we're speaking to, they do 2 or 3 scientific trips a year where they just take scientists out to study the waters and measure what's going on. And it's a judgment call at the end of the day. It's based on some scientific evidence and a experience of what they need to do to allow the species to get back to the levels and the sizes that they want.
I would think, this has been going on for years. I would think it'll be a battle even when we're not around. It'll still go on, won't it? It'll be
and I'm sure
it'll be something ongoing forever and ever and ever.
Yeah, but I'm sure there's elements of climate change in that as well, in terms of the sea being slightly different temperatures affecting where the fish is travelling to. So there's a lot of factors involved in that.
Do you think that in light of this, and hopefully we start seeing some good news internationally with the Russian war, do you see a place where the government start relaxing things and getting rid of tariffs?
Well, I think at the minute we're in. What we had is cod quota has been coming down consistently since 2021. There was a slight increase, but really since 2013, the trend's been going down. What we did have is in the pandemic, obviously a lot of quota didn't get caught and traded. So there was fish caught that was in storage. Then there was extra quota which carried over, and it took probably a year and a half, 2 years for demand to recover and for that additional supply to get flushed out of the system. So we didn't really feel the effects of these reductions until probably the end of last year. And now this year we're starting 2025 with very little extra stock holding anywhere. You know, people are not sat on lots of fish in cold stores around the world. So we're starting with a low base, and then obviously we've had the Ukraine war. That's put a large tariff on Russian fish, which, you know, means that in this current supply market, the Russian suppliers don't really need to be servicing the UK market. There's more than enough demand elsewhere where there isn't tariffs. So that's hurting us as well in terms of, on a reduced quota, the Russian vessels are not going to be offering the fish to the UK.
I just want to touch on something that you said, and tell me if I understood it wrong. So over COVID, the quota got carried over because it wasn't caught.
Yes, I think they can carry over something like, depending on which nation it is, it's something like 15%.
So if it wasn't caught, so if it wasn't for COVID, in some ways we probably, and tell me if I'm wrong, the way I understand it, we could have been in a worse position today, because if it was caught then, it probably would have brought this problem forward, couldn't it?
Yeah, possibly. I mean, the thing is, demand dropped obviously during the pandemic anyway, as you know, hospitality across the world shut down. And
you could argue that a school of fish at that age group would have had more time to grow, seeing as they weren't caught at that time. Or am I simplifying it a bit too much?
What happened was, you know, the vessels kept catching, but there was not, you know, probably not fishing as intensely, and they're not, you know, the fish they were catching, a lot of it was being processed as fillets and then frozen at sea and stored.
I see.
So it was more once people, you know, demand globally was slow to get back up to where it would normally have been. So you had all this fish in storage that was kind of making up for the shortfall in what they couldn't catch in quota that year. So we didn't really feel the effect of the quota reductions until probably the middle to end of last year, and then into this year.
Interesting.
And then you've got the Russian supply issue. You've got the fact that H&G prices in China and into Europe are the strongest at the hitting record levels. So on a reduced quota, a lot of these vessels that could have got a choice whether to do fillets or headless and gutted have been opting to do headless and gutted. So there's less supply out of a smaller supply that they can catch.
Because that's quicker money for them, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, for those that don't know, to produce fillets, what we use in the fish and chip trade, probably takes 6 weeks at sea and double the crew, and obviously a lot more diesel to power the ships, etc. Whereas to do headless and gutted, which is basically as the fish comes in, the head's removed, gutted, and it's frozen in blocks and sent on for further processing. That will take half the crew and probably about 3 to 4 weeks.
So they can go out twice.
Yeah, they could go out if they've got the quota.
Twice, as opposed to a fillet production.
Yeah, it's a lot more efficient and quick for them to produce, and a lot less work for the crew. So it's, when there's always been this battle between headless and gutted prices and fillet prices, particularly on a reduced quota market. But we certainly in the last 6 to 8 months, we've really felt that probably more than I've known in my 20 odd years in the trade.
So do you feel that the fishermen, the fisheries, still feel, with that saying about the quotas of with H&G sort of taking over a bit, do they still feel that fish and chips is very important to their industry?
Absolutely. I mean, I can categorically say that every single supplier we deal with loves coming over here, loves, all they want to do is eat fish and chips. So, if they're here a week, they'll have fish and chips 5 or 6 times. They absolutely love it. They love going to the shops. There's an immense amount of pride that their that their countries and their vessels are a key component of this great British dish. And you'll have seen it yourselves. You've got the guys from Gaddis, you've got the Icelanders coming over, you've got the Norwegians.
Yeah.
They all absolutely love it and take great pride. But ultimately, there's a huge amount of investment in what they do, and they've got to look after the crew. And if it's a straight choice between the two, and one's going to make a higher return for the crew, then that's probably the easier option for them to go with.
They do really look after the crew, don't they? The crew is
they do.
It's like family to them, isn't it? They really look after them.
And obviously they have to compete with the oil and gas industries in those countries, which pay well and is, I'm guessing is a slightly easier gig than going out on a trawler in force 8 winds. So they've got to pay them right, and they've got to give them the conditions on the vessel as best as they can. And that doesn't come cheap. You've been on the vessels, David.
I have.
They're not basic things. They're very state of the art.
Well, when you're asked to take your shoes off as soon as you go onto the main deck, little robots whizzing about, polishing the wood floor. You think you go, I thought this was a fishing vessel. No, it isn't. They're quite amazing, aren't they?
Yeah, it's a grade A, double A grade food factory that's happens to be bobbing about in the middle of the ocean.
Yeah, absolutely. Just going back to Russia, when you were talking about Russia, obviously, let's say, and hopefully it will, the war in Ukraine finishes and things come back to normal, which won't be again in a month. Will Russia come back to England, or do you think they'll just carry on doing what they're doing because it's working for them?
I think the problem is at the minute, and taking the moral argument out of it, which
that's what I'm saying. Yeah,
the cold hard fact of it is, when the invasion happened, our tariff on Russian imported fish was 6%, which was the same as the EU's. It was what we had when we left the EU. We immediately increased that to 41%, and the EU didn't. They've remained at 6%. And obviously there's zero tariff in China as well. So on an all things equal market, there's an incentive, or there's something coming back in. But at the minute, probably it's fair to say that the only people getting hurt by the tariff is our industry, because the Russians are not going to bring the fish in.
And just talking of the tariff for a moment, because the way that globalization works, if China buys it at 0% tariff, and then gets the H&G, fillets it, makes fish fingers, breaded fillets, whatever, and then sends it back, to the UK, that's classed as Chinese fish, isn't it?
Yeah, if there's a process involved and it's value added, it then becomes product of the country that processed it.
Yeah, which means that's also come to the UK anyway, and probably then got a little tariff because it's come from China.
Tariff on,
and I don't know what that figure is. I don't know if you do, but the fact is, it's come to the UK. We're eating it. Well, most people are eating it from a supermarket or whatever, or it's going to I don't know. It could be going through breaks to pubs or whatever. But it's a processed product, and actually, it didn't really help anything, did it? Because we've lost something that was a prime product, as in prime fillet, unprocessed, and it's come back, processed. I just don't see how nobody's seen that after a year and thought, oh, you know what? We understand that we've got to do something. We're not saying we shouldn't, but we can see how this isn't working because of the way that the fish markets work. I don't understand how somebody in government doesn't look at that.
Well, that's one for Andrew Crook, and I know he's constantly speaking to DEFRA and Julie Waits, who represents us in the Frozen at Sea Fillets Association, she does a great job in trying to make everybody aware of the implications of this tariff and the fact that the European Union haven't mirrored what we've done, which I think at the time the expectation was they would do the same as us. But again, that's happening in governmental departments far above my pay grade. But right now, I don't think certainly the money that's being raised from this tariff, which I believe they say goes to support the Ukraine, isn't what it would have been, because the fish just isn't arriving in the UK in the first place.
It's going to go elsewhere, isn't it?
Yeah, and it'd be nice, unless the war ends, and even if the war ends, I can't really see politically how they'll just immediately stop all the sanctions.
Yeah,
but
I do wonder. I do wonder. It depends what America does. If America puts the squeeze on everybody, and we're seeing now they're being very protective over their economy. So I think what we're going to see is, I wonder if we start seeing tariffs on all the fish we're talking about here, Icelandic, Norwegian. If we start seeing higher tariffs of imports for that fish because they want people to be eating more Alaskan fish, let's say, for argument's sake, and we could conceivably see that, then that changes things again. If they then release sanctions on Russia, and then obviously we see that Europe didn't follow us down this road, I wonder if our government just say, you know what, we're doing this on our own here. No one seems to be doing anything.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's, it's a conversation I had with Andrew not long ago, funnily enough, is that if they can't do anything on tariffs, which I can understand that, until things change in that part of the world, can we lobby for a bit of help on a temporary VAT reduction on cooked fish?
Yeah, I don't see that ever happening, mate.
No, but if they're taking it with one hand, we've got to try and get something back with the other.
I think what we're likely to see, Bobby, is taken with both hands.
Yes. Well, we can all hope.
I'm just trying to cheer David up. He's just had to pay his tax bill, bless him, and he's a bit stressed at the minute. Look at
fucking stressed.
He's had both their hands in both his pockets.
Is that a sales sticker on that bicycle?
Hey, leave his bike alone. Leave his bike alone.
Yeah, and the pan's cracked, and it's just like, oh, you're joking, Bought me tickets for the awards, bought me hotel and all that. It's just like, anyway, there's always a gin at the end of the day.
Yeah,
that's what I
there is.
So
there's always a gin.
So one thing we've been doing, Bobby, a lot more, as part of the masterclasses, or whether it's what we're doing at Ceres, is we've been trying to help people figure out the cost of things. So, for example, I don't know if you've seen, last week we launched some calculators. And on the front of it, they're quite basic, but actually they serve a real important purpose. So one that's been launched, I think right now, I think my developers just uploaded it right now as we speak. You put your case weight in. So if this is for frozen at sea fish, you put your case weight in, you put your price, the case price. You then put in all your information and it spits out your figure. You put in your loss adjusted for bone, skin, if it came with skin on and you wanted to skin it yourself. We've put in a 5% moisture loss figure as well. I think, David, 5%, does that sound fair to you?
Yeah, about that. Yeah.
So I thought I'd check with you, David. And then it tells you your ounce price, and then you go from there. And I think one of the things we wanted to do is sort of help people figure that out, because I think that's something that, and we were talking earlier with Gary, and we were saying there's many people that don't weigh their fish. They don't, they're just cutting it to eye. And although David, who's very experienced and been doing it since before scales were invented, he'd know how to cut fish, obviously, by eye. But for the average person who might be struggling when they've got a million other jobs, just trying to add back in these little steps, weigh your fish, check your fish, look for moisture loss, do all of these things, because it would help you, it helps your company as well. Because if people understand that they can get extra margin out of that slab, it sort of makes them feel a bit better, doesn't it?
Well, either that or it helps them price it accordingly.
Doesn't it? It makes the fish you're selling, if they're getting the most out of it,
and
they're doing it, it's not as expensive as they think it is.
Yeah, or it's, as I say, if nothing else, it's helping you work out what you should be charging for it.
Yeah. Well, because the price, I think a lot of people like to think that if you've got a case that's 20 kilos, but your fish weight is 300 grams, that isn't exactly that's not your figure. That's not your figure at all, especially if you're, skinning it, boning it, and defrosting it. Of course, those things just aren't the same. And I think, but we've done it with fresh counts or chilled, because the name changes. We've done it with chilled. And, that's one of the most used calculators, believe it or not. And all that is put in your count, so 40, and your price, and it spits out a division. And I think these little things that are really hopefully going to help people move forward and be able to sort of understand costs, especially. And, it is something that generally people only do when times get tight. Like you were talking about it earlier. I remember seeing on the groups when the Ukraine war kicked off, someone said, "Oh my God, I got this Ben and Jerry's freezer." And, it was in the group, I can't remember which group, and it was like, "I got a Ben and Jerry's freezer. I figured out it cost me £7 a week to keep on. It's a retail freezer out the front." And he's thinking, I don't even sell that many ice cream to make the profit. And you think, because I think at the time when Ben and Jerry's guy, I'm just using them as an example, by the way, but when an ice cream company comes around and says, "Hey, you could make extra sales with delivery because everyone buys ice cream with their delivery." And you're like, "Okay, then. Oh, electric's cheap. I'll have that freezer. It don't cost me anything."
Yeah.
And then you figure out, oh my God, that freezer actually costs loads to run. So I think this is where we've been writing a lot about just being careful about expanding menus. Because I think it's quick to add chicken products, add one, add two. But if one isn't selling, you've got it in the freezer for a month, 2 months. It's not actually cost effective. And I think so we have been trying our best to sort of help people through this situation massively. And I guess that's all anyone can do, really, because it is going to get tight out there.
It is. It's going to be, it's like I say, there's challenges this year. And until one of the major dynamics changes, quota is not going to change, improve for a while. So unless the situation with Russian sanctions or another market demand drops.
In your experience, what gets tight first? Is it tightly graded or traditionally graded? So like 32 pluses, 1632s, or is it your 8 to 10s? What, in your experience, what's going to get tight first?
It varies, Stelios, really, in terms of what size of fish they're catching. So, as you go through the year, they'll catch more of one size than another. Depends on demand from other markets. So if demand increases from America for Icelandic tight grades, then that's going to push more pressure on them. Previously, it had been on the tight grade skinned and bone, but because that was a higher value, that was probably the one thing we were seeing a little bit more consistent supply from Russia on. That's starting to, as the standard grade pin bone in's gone up, obviously that's pushed a bit of demand on the skinless boneless, and that's obviously started to creep up now as well. So I just think in the current climate we're in, it's going to be everything, really. I don't think there's going to be one outlying product that starts to go up quicker than the other.
What do you sell the most of? Skinned pin bone in or pin bone out?
Skinless pin bone in.
Skinless pin bone in.
Generally, 16 to 32 would be the biggest seller.
Skinless pin bone in. Okay.
But there's certainly a lot more people using boneless now than ever before, be that standard grades or tight grades.
What's the Bobby? I've not bought fish for bloody over 10 years. I've just, obviously since I've been out the shops, but what would be the price difference for just roughly speaking, what's the price difference between 32 plus bone in and 32 plus bone out?
I would say the price difference in the last few months was quite close. There wasn't a lot in it. It was probably about £10 a case.
Okay, so it's not crazy money, like.
No, and at that kind of level, it makes sense to use boneless because of saving labour and not having the waste and stuff. But I think on cod, that's probably going to now creep to 25, 30 quid a case.
And that's when you start thinking to yourself, well, actually, I can do that myself because it won't take long to do a quick V-cut, would it?
Yeah. And it's more, look, some shops are geared up where they've not got the facilities or the knowledge to cut, so that they rely on the tight grade skinless boneless. But I think the shops that do cut fish themselves can jump between pin boning and boneless because if they're buying the larger fillets and portioning them anyway, they're already at the bench with a knife. It's just taking the bone out, which factor in that waste. If the gap's not that big, it's probably worth a while. But there's some people it doesn't suit the way they cut to buy the boneless because of the way that the vessels bone them.
I think sometimes as well. I mean, I usually mainly use skinned and boneless, as you know, Bobby. And I think because the reason I do that is when it's actually trimmed on the boat, it's trimmed better. So they take the bone out and any waste or any thinness is actually trimmed away. So when you actually get the fillet, it's a lot cleaner. Whereas if you get it with bone in, there will be a bit at the top that is waste as well. Does that make sense, what I'm saying there?
Yeah. And I think maybe I don't know if it's different on haddock to cod, David. Obviously, it's a longer pin bone on cod.
Yeah, massive. And it's heavy.
Yeah.
It's heavy. Yeah.
So that can be a factor. And then there's certain vessels that are using older machinery to bone fish, whereas some of the newer ones are using the laser-guided water jet. So that's a lot cleaner cut. So you're getting more fish.
But as these boats are getting older, as we know, they've built quite a lot, haven't they, the last 2 or 3 years? I mean, on, for instance, Liner Brisk, they've already bought, that what was that, 8 years ago they built a new one? And then they've just built another one, haven't they? Has that old one been put to bed then, or is that out fishing as well?
No, it's out fishing, but when the new one's ready, what you'll tend to find is that they then sell the old one on. So that'll have a bit like buying a new car, I suppose. You can move your old one on for a lesser price. I mean, there's some fishing vessels that are still going strong after 30, 40 years. They're still out there. They look after them well.
Bit of WD-40 keeps them going.
Yeah.
So So the doom and gloom. What do you think is going to happen this next? Let's say not year, 18 months.
It's very hard to predict what's going to happen in other markets or with tariffs. I mean, that's kind of out of our control as a nation or as an importer. I think there's. The fish and chip industry needs to rely on companies like Smales, like Warner's, and who you mentioned, and the other importers to do the work with the suppliers to pay the right price to get the fish to keep flowing into the UK, and we'll try and make sure there's enough fish to meet demand. I can see cod quotas remaining at the current levels, maybe dropping a little bit further. A little bit more haddock supply. So I think we'll get to a peak price and then hopefully there'll be a bit of a period of stability where everyone can adjust to what the new levels are.
Would you be willing to tell us what you think the peak price will be? As an educated guess, as an expert in the field?
Put it this way, Stel. 6 months ago, I would have said I don't think they'll get to £10 a kilo as the import price. Mm-hmm. I'd bite your hand off to buy at £10 a kilo today. So it's very, very difficult to predict. I mean, I can see skinless, boneless fish hitting £14, £15 a kilo.
Wow.
And it may go more than that. It may peak at that. There's a lot of factors that are not in our remit to really have any influence on that can affect it one way or the other.
So I think, listening to that, we have got a tough year because obviously we've got April coming with wages going up,
Yes.
We do employ young people in the industry.
Yeah.
And I'm a great believer, I've said it before, that if you are 18, why can't you get the same wage as a 21-year-old? I think that's the right thing to do, but obviously we've got to adjust to that. And obviously got the NI going up. And I think we have a tough year. And I think we have got to work together as industries. We've got to work with you guys, making sure that we're ordering, we're paying on time, and helping you guys do the deal for us, and trusting you guys to get the best price for us. And I think that's what you do anyway.
I mean, for us, the challenge is obviously you've got to have enough product to sell all year round to keep your cash flow moving, and so you don't want to. You have to manage the amount that you're selling, but I think generally I'd speak for not just the company I work for. I think all the major companies who are important in this industry and supply this industry. if a shop's got a good relationship with a supplier, they can generally work out a deal for a period of time just to give them some stability, and as you say, make sure that continuity is there. I mean, that's going to be everybody's challenge this year. Is not just the price; it's making sure that the continuity is there all year round.
And I think also he's been maybe open-minded that maybe you can't get 1632 skinless and boneless, and you might have to go to 1632 with pin bone in and be flexible on that. And I think that is something else, is that you might have to find that you might have to change your way of cutting, or you might have to change the fish that you buy because there just isn't enough about, or it just might price itself out.
Yeah, I think adaptability is going to be key. And I think, people have to realise, and we say it, but I do think some people don't grasp that, it's not like a burger where you place an order with a factory and 10,000 are manufactured all the same. It's wild hunted. What you get is what you get, and where that fish ends up is usually where the best return is.
Yeah. Talking about harvesting and hunting, would you say, is the quality of fish that comes out always about the same, or is the good quality cod, good quality haddock, and inferior cod, inferior haddock?
I think generally 99 times out of 100, the quality is pretty similar. Obviously, there'll be variances, David, in terms of the time of year, what it's been feeding on, all these things. But I think that certainly most of the trawlers, if not all the trawlers we deal with, all the longliners, they're very careful, as you know, on managing how much they actually bring out in one go, so they're not overcrowding nets.
Yeah,
they're not bruising the fish. The way so that they can process it in a timely manner, they can bleed it properly. So I think generally the little variants, the variances that do happen, probably happen on board.
We wouldn't even know about them.
No, exactly. Or sometimes you might see, very rare these days, but you might fish, cod that's maybe got some blood spots, or it's a bit darker, and you can trace it back, and you realise that they had a particularly heavy haul that day and they had to get it through quick, or it took longer to get through, or it might be there's loads of little nuances that can affect the end product, but generally what's coming out of the water tends to be of a consistent quality.
Yeah, which is high, isn't it? It's amazing. Frozen at sea. I know people. I mean, I was speaking with Stell about the chef at Harrods.
Oh, Tom Kerridge.
Saw that.
Tom Kerridge.
Yeah.
How can you not see that article? It's constant.
And on about, it was moaning about, saying about justifying his price. Well, that's his price. He's in Harrods. He's not going to charge 15 quid, is he? So, get real. He's going to charge as much as he can. 8 chips and a little bit of fresh fish. And actually said cod or haddock. I think it was probably Cornish hare.
Or
brill.
When we checked the menu, it said it just changes. It's daily.
Yeah. So going back to what he said it's not like fish and chip shops that buy frozen at sea in blocks from China.
No, he said sometimes from China. Not trying to defend Tom who wrote it.
And I was quite put out because I don't think he realises that how fantastic this frozen at sea is. Go, ask him to go ask what he thinks Michel Roux thinks and what Simon Holston thinks about frozen at sea. I mean, they're massive advocates of it, how good it is. When we went to Westminster College last year, where most of the guys train, how they were singing wax lyrical about how great frozen at sea was, and invariably it's better than the fresh they're getting,
Yeah.
And I think people, don't realise how fantastic frozen at sea is and what goes into getting that block of fish to us, the technology and how they look after it.
I think that is improving, that perception. I think the awards have helped massively with that because it's pushed shops to actually, say what they use, push the provenance of what they're using and why they choose that and why it's better quality for them or more sustainable or what have you. And I think particularly the Norwegian Seafood Council have done some great work with the chefs you've named, David, and to push the quality of frozen at sea. But there is still that bit of snobbery about it that seems to be out there, and it's unfortunately that's not going to change quickly enough.
No,
I think that whole story, I think it keeps going around in circles, but I actually think it does our industry a favour. I really do. Like, not being funny, when you see that he's charging 40 quid and they come into your shop and it's 12, like, you know what, he's done you a favour, like, really has. Like, and I don't see the outrage from our industry sometimes. It's like, how can he get away with it? Because he's in Harrods, which is in Knightsbridge, which is in London. So that's how he gets away with it. And
that's why he gets away with it. But it's just that the bit that upset me was that he said that, he did almost dismissed that FSA wasn't very good.
Yes, it was a cheap.
In his defence, David, you got outraged. I can't even let me finish it.
Go on.
He said sometimes from China, yeah. And obviously, he's used the word China because we know it sounds terrible. Yeah, that's why. But look, he's probably buying 15 fillets a day, 20. I'm guessing here. He's probably buying, let's say, a couple of stone a day from Brixham, or Billingsgate even, and whatever white fish it is, and he can get away with it. And not being funny, people that go there to spend 40 quid. Like, it's like us lot going to the paper shop and buying a Lucasade for £1. It's like, do you know what I mean? It's nothing. It's nothing to them. It's a rounding error. So, and it'll be similar for that Mayfair to some degree where they are. Like, these are prime retail estates, as in, so, So,
I mean, they did fish and chips, which I think was about a 7-ounce fish, chips, 3 sauces, to eat in was $24.95, which
that's directly that's good value to again in London, isn't it? Yeah,
it's directly opposite Harrods. So you're in the most prime.
They're chipping away at Harrods. You see, they're chipping away.
But so are you looking forward to the awards, Bobby?
I am. Yes, it's always good. I mean, that's what a great thing it is for the industry, and I'm so glad the federation took it back on. And I think there's lots we can do with it as an industry. It does bug me that Seafish don't contribute, considering the levy we raise as an industry, but that's another conversation. But I think you get all the supply. Most of the suppliers go to great effort to fly in from all corners of Europe, and it's just a positive time for the industry. And the shops that are entering, there's some newer faces in there that probably weren't in previous times, and the standard's very good.
Do you guys ever like liaise with anybody at Seafish and say, "Hey, where you gone? We miss you." Hey, remember this industry that contributes to your coffers? Like I don't know, because they literally have fell off the radar.
I mean, it's you'll get. I'm careful what I say, but you'll get answers about what they do provide, but personally, I think as the biggest single source of income for that organisation, our industry should get a lot more out of it.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't think you'll see an argument from me on that.
I don't think you'll see anybody disagree with you on that, Bobby.
Yeah, and even if it's just marketing support and you could put a good campaign together for 150
campaign
grand.
costs now have just dropped. It's not like that.
Yeah. And like you say, that how great fish and chips is and what value it is for money and all this sort of thing, and just reminding people that it is a natural product. There's a lot of work goes into it, and what you're getting is very, very, very cheap, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
What you're seeing here, Bobby, is an absolute schism between me and David Miller. I would not spend a penny saying all those things. I would spend a penny saying it's bloody tasty. Eat it where you want. It's a guilty pleasure. But that's where we're different, I guess. But that's also what's amazing about fish and chips, though, isn't it? Because it means something to everybody in a different way.
Yeah. And the right subtle message and some great imagery.
Yeah. Put somebody behind photography, put somebody behind videography, social media.
Banging our own drum. We I've been to David's shop to get some images done, and a few other shops, and we always try and put a great image of fish and chips on our vehicles.
Yeah.
With the idea that somebody's driving behind one of our vehicles and sees it and thinks, "Oh, I fancy that."
Yeah, I'll have some fish and chips.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's half the battle. Half the time is just sowing that seed in someone's head about this. That's bloody good. I'm going to go and eat that.
Yeah. I've got one more question.
Go on, then we're going to wrap up after this.
No, it's not about fish and chips. It's about Smales. So obviously, you deal with fish and chip shops.
Yes.
what else do you deal with? Because I bet, a lot of people think, like all the other suppliers just deal with fish and chip shops. That, I know we're a massive part of what you do, but who else do you supply to, and who else do you work with within, obviously, hospitality or even retail? Because it just can't be fish and chips, can it?
No, I mean, fish and chips is probably 85% of what we do.
That's a big number, isn't it? That's
yeah.
a big number.
At one time, as you know, we used to have a processing factory supplying supermarkets.
Yep.
Which we came out of probably about 7 years ago. We wanted to be really focused on this part of the business, and it's a very, very difficult environment to work in, is retail with the retailers. So we became very focused on fish and chips then. But yeah, we do have an element of where we're supplying restaurant groups, food service wholesalers. We've got a range of kind of niche seafood own brand products that we deal with, a lot of like I say, restaurant groups, wholesalers, cruise ships, holiday parks. That kind of environment is another little arm of our business, and one that's just growing in a nice steady manner.
Great. Thanks for that, Bobby.
No, I think it's been great, Bobby. And we'll never get bored of talking to you. Like I said, this is the 3rd episode with you on, and you always come prepared, and I like that. And you don't sort of hide behind, I can't answer that, my boss won't let me, and things like that. You just sort of go with it. And
I've not told him I'm doing it.
Oh well, yeah. So no, it's been great, and thanks for your time. And David, are you sure you don't want to ask one more question?
No, that's it.
He wants to get home. Like he's just.
I'll look forward. Are you going the night before, Bobby?
I am. Yes.
Fantastic news. Well, you know where I'll see you, don't you?
Yeah. We normally frequent the same place, David.
It's been a pleasure, guys.
Thanks.
Okay, guys. And
cheers.
Obviously, as if anybody in the industry listening to this has got any questions, feel free to give us a ring. We're happily there to. We're not just here to sell fish and supply fish. We're here to give advice and try and help businesses be better within the industry.
Top stuff. That's why we like you, Bobby. Keep doing what you do.
Okay, we'll try our best.
And that's a wrap with today's episode with Bobby Joyce, David Miller, and me. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What stood out in today's conversation? And also, let us know your thoughts by joining the Ceres podcast discussion group on Facebook. And don't forget to head over to our website, check out our calculators. They are designed to give your business the edge it deserves. At Ceres, we're completely committed to helping your business thrive, whether through innovative products or expert insights. We're here to support you. And if you've got any questions or want to share what you're working on, reach out at any time. Until next time, keep frying, keep growing, and we'll see you in the next episode.